Hey, what you reading for?
Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel where I talk about books, literary, horror, classics, and contemporary. Today, I have put together a list of 12 short books that will help you break out of a reading slump. These are not necessarily my favorite short books. These are short books that I really love, but that are also have a high success rate with the readers that they are intended for. And no short story collections. These are all novels, but short. Like the longest is probably 220 pages or so. And there's quite a good variety. There's literary fiction, there's horror, there's classics, there's contemporary. There's a few books that are humoristic, and there's a few books that are that are made for children, but they also work really well in adults. And there's even a disturbing book. So there's a good variety. If that sounds like your thing, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe buttons. I'm going to hand things over to the great American composer John Adams for the intro sequence, and I will see you on the other side for 12 short books to break you out of your reading slump. In no particular order, let's start with some literary fiction with The Curious Incident with the Dog in the Nighttime by Mark Haddon. This is a book that is narrated by a young boy. I believe he's 15, maybe 16 years old. And he's an autistic boy. He has Asperger's, I believe. And so this is a unique and inventive narration and unique way to tell a story. It's short. It's about 220 pages with some illustrations. So the language is direct and easy to read. You could probably read this in 3.5 hours, I would think. And it's a heartwarming story. I'll be honest with you. I found it inventive, endearing, and quite touching. I did look at some one-star reviews, and they mentioned that I guess because this book had received so much critical acclaim and praise and award consideration, that some readers were expecting high literature and high prose. But this is a young autistic boy who is narrating the story, so the language is quite direct. And also because he's autistic, he has difficulty connecting with people on an emotional level, or difficulty empathizing even. So some readers found the narrator to be spoiled and selfish, which you could make that case. Yeah, you could make that case, but that's one of the challenges of autism, right? So it's a different kind of story, and it's unique. I thought it was great. 5-star read from me. Also in literary fiction, we have a classic, Breakfast at Tiffany's by Truman Capote. Have you read this? Excellent. Fantastic. Short. You could, 200 pages, if that. You could read this in 3 or 4 hours. And it's beautiful. It's a story about shaping your life by changing your perception, or changing your life by shaping your perception. The main central character, her name is Holly Golightly. She's having a bad go of things. Her life is difficult. It's not fair. So she changes the way she sees her life to a point that's delusional, or and this is not the power of positive thinking or some Oprah book club voodoo. This is like the power of delusion. This is the refusing to meet reality on its terms, and with the positive and the negative consequences that come with that approach. I love this book, 5 stars for me. And I have not seen the movie, but I do know that it is quite different. The portrayal of Holly Golightly by that super famous actress, Dutch actress, I can't think of her name, Audrey Hepburn, right? The portrayal of Holly Golightly by Audrey Hepburn is quite different in the book. It's a very different experience, the movie. And so people who are familiar with the movie, they went into the book and they were disappointed. They were kind of shocked even. Also, this is 1950s New York, so the characters, they use language that is reflective of that time, which would be maybe some, they mention people's homosexuality and maybe their race as well, which some readers interpreted as being racist and homophobic. I don't know. If you're expecting to read a book set in 1950s New York and you expect the characters to have modern sensibilities, then yeah, you might be disappointed. But it's a great book, I think. And let's how about a few humoristic books, right? We've got another classic, but from 1882 by Brazilian writer Machado de Assis. And this is The Alienist. This book is more of a novella. It's like 100 pages, 90 pages maybe. And this is a book that has like a tongue-in-cheek send up of this modern or this new discipline called psychology, right? That was sweeping Europe. So this psychologist, right? He opens the first asylum in Brazil, in a small town in Brazil, and what he does is he notices that people acting strange, right? So he'll have them put into the asylum, and he finds a way to, he finds a strange behavior in everyone, right? So eventually everyone gets sent into the asylum, and he's the only one who is not in the asylum. And then it dawns on him that everyone's in the asylum and he's outside. That means that he is different from everybody else. So he's the crazy one. So he lets everybody out, and then he has himself institutionalized. And that's the story. I gave you the whole story of The Alienist. But it's fun and it's funny. It's kind of witty. It's not mean-spirited. I mean, it does kind of make fun of psychology, but it's not mean-spirited. It's just a funny examination of that. Some of the 1-star reviews I noticed generally were people who are not familiar with 19th century prose, and they found like the sentence structures complicated, some of the words overly sophisticated, which is just the product of the style of the 19th century, and also because it's satire, and the doctor, the psychologist, he needs to be portrayed as kind of arrogant. So maybe the language is a bit sophisticated for that reason. But if you're familiar with 19th century prose, that won't be a problem for you. Well, it's a funny book. And also, speaking of funny books, another classic, we'll jump ahead some 100 years for The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. Right? This is a short book that you could read very quickly, and 3 hours or something, and that could really help you get out of a reading slump. And this is basically like the destruction of the earth, right? Which is great. And this guy, he misses the destruction of it. He's taken away, and he's taken on a tour of the universe or something. That's kind of the premise. And it's fun, and it's funny, and it's kind of silly, very light. I was surprised, actually, that I found some 1-star reviews for it, and it was basically people who were upset that this book is not the funniest book I've ever read in my life, so they gave it 1 star. I think it's such a celebrated and popular book that a lot of people went in with the expectations of it being the funniest thing they've ever read. And I don't know, maybe it is the funniest book ever written. I don't know. But I think that's probably not a good expectation to have going into it. Also, it's very male-centric, right? This is just a bunch of men and some robots flying around in space. So some people say, where are the women? Or, I don't know. And now the boobies books. Boobies books. I call them boobies books because, like boobies, right? They were originally intended for children, but it's really the adults that end up enjoying them, mostly. Oh, so Haron and the Sea of Stories by Salman Rushdie. It's a fantastic book. I love this book. It's a portal fantasy, in that this young boy, his father is a famous storyteller, and his father loses his voice and loses his ideas, like all of a sudden. So the boy, one night, he is visited by a strange creature who takes him to strange lands, who has him exploring these sea of stories, and that maybe they can help his father find his gift again. I think it would work on children, but it definitely is more adults than you might expect a children's book to be. And some one-star reviews reflected that. This is a book for children. It's super cutesy and not very serious. And then other one-star reviewers complain because it's a book for children and then it's too dark and serious for children. Salman Rushdie was going through some tough things at the time when he wrote this book. He was going through a divorce. And he wrote this story to explain to his son what was going on in his life and explain about the divorce. But I think he really wrote it for himself. This book is it a book for children? Is it a book for adults? I think it's both, but I think mainly it's a book for the author. I think he was working out some stuff, and he found this way to do it by working on this book, and I think it's great. Another book intended for young readers, but is fantastic for adults, and that is The Thief of Always by Clive Barker. And this is kind of a fairy tale-ish way of storytelling. This is a boy who is taken to the holiday house, which is a house where every day is a year. So you wake up and it's New Year's, and then every day you get to celebrate your birthday, and you celebrate Christmas, and you have Halloween. You get everything in one day. So it's a story about instant gratification, and what this book manages to do is it manages to exalt and to celebrate the in-between times. The times that are seen as ordinary or dull. It exalts them and celebrates those times, and it's quite effective and charming for that. However, some one-star reviewers they went into this book for their children, for their young children, like under 10 years old, and they found it perhaps too dark, maybe too scary for those children, and so they gave it a 1-star review. But some people, because it's a Clive Barker book, some people went in expecting it to be terrifying, right? Because this is the master of horror, Clive Barker. And they thought, oh, this is not that scary. So they gave it 1-star review. I don't know. It's a book that is celebrated. A lot of people love it. If you haven't read it, and if you ever get into a reading slump, it's a good book to get you out of that. It's got fairy tale vibes. Speaking of fairy tale vibes, one of my favorite books of all time, We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Here we have a young teenager named Mary Catherine, and she lives in this small village. And the people in the village, they don't like her, and they don't like her family. And the feeling is mutual. Like Mary Catherine, she doesn't like these people. All she wants to do is stay in her house with her older sister, Constance. And she just wants everyone to leave her alone. I love the style and the voice in this book. It's got a creepy yet fun and charming voice to it. It manages to combine all of those. Her work isn't what I would consider to be plot driven. It's more like moods and atmosphere and suggestions of atmosphere and moods, character driven. And maybe we have always lived in the castle. That this might be her most plot driven book, but it's not really, still that not heavily plot driven. And some readers who aren't into that, who expect things to be more plot driven, they might not like it. But if you've never checked out Shirley Jackson's writing, I think you really should. And this is a great place to start. It was her last book, but it's also her shortest book, and it's my favorite. Not only of hers, but one of my favorites of all time. How about some contemporary horror? The Vessel by Adam Neville. Now, this is a short book, 150 pages. It was initially a screenplay that he decided to rework into a novel, and that's quite apparent when you read it. I don't like to recommend this book to people who are not familiar with Adam Neville, because this is an outlier in his catalog. Usually with an Adam Neville book, you get something that's a bit more substantive and it's more immersive experience and scarier. This is not that. This is a different Adam Neville experience, but it's still a fun one, and it's a breezy read, and I quite enjoyed it. So I think it would be, if you're into horror, contemporary horror, I think it would be a good way to quickly break out of your reading slump. We have a central character. She's a single mother, a caregiver. She's taken on an assignment to look after an old lady who's in a wheelchair, and she's seemingly not all there, right? But because she's a single mother, she can't find like daycare for her daughter, so she ends up bringing her daughter to work, and her 6-year-old daughter, or whatever, young daughter, ends up really taking to the client, to this old lady who's seemingly senile and weak, but neither of those things. So the two take to each other kind of well. And I'll just leave it at that. It's a breezy read. You could read it in like 2.5 hours. And if you're into contemporary horror, it could snap that reading slump. Readers, the 1-star reviews from it, these are readers who are familiar with Adam Neville and were expecting the classic Adam Neville experience, which is immersive and scary, and this is a different type of experience. So I think if you go into it and try to meet the book on its terms, I think it could be a good read. And there are 3 horror classics that made the list. There's a book from 1886, Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. It's a short book, 140 pages. I was so surprised when I went into this because I was familiar with the story, right, like all of us. And I was so surprised at how much I enjoyed it, the execution. I was surprised also at how much of a body horror experience it gave me. Because this man, he creates this formula which allows him to separate his good side from his bad side or his dark side, and allows for him to express and live out his dark side, right? As if it's a different personality. The more he does it, the more this shapes and it transforms his appearance. Right? It's like an opposite picture of Dorian Gray thing going on. Thought it was very well done. A few one-star reviews, they complained about the language. The sentence structures are too long and it's a sophisticated language. I think these readers are not used to reading 19th century prose. But if 19th century prose is your thing, this is a great one. Also, in the horror classics is The Bad Seed by William March. This is from 1954. This is the original Killer Kid book. We have this 6-year-old girl named Rhoda. Rhoda? She kills people, right? Of course she kills people. Her name is Rhoda. Rhoda. Sounds like a tool that you would use in woodworking. Hey, hand me that Rhoda. I need to level off this table. Rhoda. What was I talking about? I was talking about killing people, right? Oh yeah, Rhoda from The Bad Seed. She 6-year-old girl kills people. And the story is kind of told through the perspective of the mother. And this book, what I liked about this book is it has a good mix of camp. It has a little mystery to it, and it's got a little horror element. So it does a good job mixing those three elements to it. I think the one-star reviews suggested that some readers went into this expecting more horror than because it is a horror classic, but it's pretty tame in terms of the horror. It has a relatively low body count, and its focus. I mean, it's more of a mystery thriller with horror elements. And another classic, I Am Legend by Richard Matheson. Right, this is the last man on Earth, and everybody's been changed into vampires from this virus or from something we have no idea why. I love the last man on Earth context. It's a lot of fun, and I think this book is I think it handles the whole vampire myth and gives it a new twist on the vampire myth. I think it does a great job with that. One-star reviews complained that the character, right, this last man on Earth, he is a sexually repressed misogynist. Sexually repressed misogynist, so that's bad. So we'll give this book 1 star. I think a lot of people, when they give book ratings, book reviews, they think that they're making a moral judgment on the protagonist. Like, this protagonist is bad, so that's a 1-star review, as opposed to reviewing the reading experience they had. Or maybe they can't separate the two. Like, if they feel that the protagonist is morally reprehensible, then that means that they don't like the book. I don't know. I think if you're able to separate those two things, then yeah, it's probably better. By looking at these 1-star reviews, these classic books, these books that are beloved by many, that's the impression I got, is that a lot of it is just virtue signaling, or readers who are not able to appreciate a book when the central characters are flawed. So whether it's some homophobic slurs in Breakfast at Tiffany's, or it's the misogyny or misogynistic thoughts that the protagonist in I Am Legend expresses, or the selfishness from the autistic narrator in Curious Incident with the Dog in the Nighttime. Yeah, a lot of readers, they will judge a book based on their moral assessment of the protagonist. It's their right. It's their right to do so. And let's end on a disturbing book, Piercing by Ryu Murakami. Now, this is a book I really liked. I was very impressed with this book. In fact, I made a whole video dedicated to this book. Here we have a man. He's a new father, and he has these intrusive thoughts. He has this compulsion, this urge to pierce his infant daughter with an ice pick, and he thinks that this is not a good urge, right? And he needs to get rid of this urge, this obsession, even. And he thinks he will be able to do so if he just satisfies it. If he satisfies it once, he convinces himself that it will just go away. So he hires a sex worker that he plans on killing, right? To rid himself of this urge, to fulfill it, right? And so that's the premise of the story. It's quite disturbing, but it's not graphic, really. It's disturbing on a psychological level, and on intimately psychological. So some of the 1-star reviews. Ryu Murakami is also famous for Audition. It's a book that he made into a movie afterwards. And so some of the 1-star reviews for Piercing were from readers who were familiar with Audition as a movie and as a book, and they were expecting the exact same kind of experience, but what they got was something more psychological, and I guess they weren't happy with that. And because this is celebrated as a disturbing book, a lot of people, or some readers, interpreted that as graphic. They said so they went into the read expecting graphic violence, but they didn't get graphic violence, not enough to satisfy them. So that's why I specify that this is disturbing, but more on a psychological level than a graphic. So that's 12 short novels that should help you get out of your reading slump. Do you have any experience with the books or the authors that I mentioned on this list? Maybe you have a short novel that you could add to the list that you think would be good to get out of the reading slump. And hopefully you're not in a reading slump right now, but you keep these titles in your back pocket so that if you do, pull one out and break free from your slump. I always look forward to connecting with you in the comment section. Thank you for watching. I'll see you at the next video.